Click! The video starts. I hate doing these intros. Feel like a goddamn YouTuber trying to sell you something you don't need. But I do need your help. This channel, it's all I have left of my old life in a way. And it's slipping away. So yeah, subscribe, like, comment, whatever. Do what you gotta do. Please? Alright, backstory time. I was golden. Not trying to brag, just stating facts. 28 now, but rewind 7 years, and you're looking at Jake, the all-American boy. Grew up in Winnetka, Illinois. Perfect lawn, perfect house, 2-car garage, the whole cliche. Dad, Richard, was a hotshot financial advisor. Made the kind of money that meant we never had to worry. Mom, Carol, was the queen of the PTA, always volunteering, always making sure our family looked like it stepped out of a goddamn magazine. I was their biological son. Did well in school without even trying. Captain of the baseball team. Could charm the socks off anyone. I wasn't perfect, okay? Snuck out to parties. Drank too much with my buddies. Did the dumb shit all teenagers do. But nothing. Nothing that would ever threaten that perfect image Mom worked so hard to protect. Then they adopted Lily. She was 3, this tiny little thing with huge, innocent eyes. Carol always wanted a daughter. I was 10, and suddenly, bam, I wasn't the center of the universe anymore. It was all Lily this and Lily that. Jealous? Yeah, probably. Felt like I was being replaced. Growing up, we were, okay, normal siblings, I guess. Fought over stupid things, but I always had her back. When she was getting bullied in 2nd grade, some jerk pulling her hair, I was in 9th. I walked her to school every day, had a talk with that little shit. He never bothered her again. I even showed her how to throw a punch, just in case. Big brother duty, you know? Fast forward, senior year of college. I was living. Captain of the baseball team, scouts sniffing around, decent shot at getting drafted, 3.8 GPA in business, minor in finance, solid friends, the kind you call at 3 a.m. if your car broke down. And I was in the best shape of my life. Gym rat since high school, benching over 300, squatting damn near 500. Yeah, I was vain. I liked how I looked. Sue me! Dated a few girls, nothing serious. Focused on the future. Dad had connections. I was lined up for a management training program at a prestigious firm downtown after graduation. My path was paved, man. Finish strong, maybe play ball, then the corporate climb, wife, kids, the whole damn American dream. Lily was 15 then, a sophomore in high school. Artsy type. Always in some school play. Overdramatic about everything. Typical teenager. We grabbed dinner when I was home, caught up. Normal sibling stuff. Or so I thought. Looking back, there were signs. Subtle jabs when Mom bragged about my baseball accomplishments. Little digs about how easy I had it. Weird stories she'd tell about school. Stuff that couldn't possibly be true. But I blew it off. Hindsight, right? It was a Tuesday in October. Just finished a hellish practice. Coach ran us ragged after we lost a weekend series to our biggest rivals. My legs felt like lead. Shoulder was killing me. Good kind of sore though. Knew I'd pushed myself. Hit the showers, threw on jeans and a hoodie, checked my phone. 37 missed calls. 54 texts. All from family. You're sick. How could you? You're dead to me. My heart slammed against my ribs. First thought was, someone died. Grandma? Grandpa? Called Dad. He answered on the 2nd ring. What the hell is going on? I barked into the phone. His voice was ice. I'd never heard him like that. Get your ass home now. Don't you dare go anywhere else. Then he hung up, stood there in the parking lot staring at my phone, trying to make sense of it. Called Mom? No answer. Best friend from high school? Nothing. It was like I was contaminated. Drove the 20 minutes home in a daze. Stomach twisted in knots. NPR was on, but I didn't hear a damn thing. pulled into the driveway. Uncle Mike's truck was there. A bunch of other cars, too. Mike was Dad's younger brother, a construction contractor. Always had a temper, never really liked me. Before I could even get out, Mike charged me, yanked open my truck door, grabbed my shirt, and slammed me against the side. "I'm going to kill you," he screamed. His face was inches from mine, spit flying everywhere, beer stench thick on his breath. His eyes were wild, like nothing I'd ever seen. I could have broken free. Easily. Mike was 50, out of shape. I was a 22-year-old athlete in my prime. But I was too shocked. Frozen. Dad and my other uncle, Steve, pulled him off me. "Inside." "Now," Dad ordered, not looking at me. Walked up the steps into our living room. "Packed?" Mom was on the couch, eyes swollen, face blotchy from crying. Both sets of grandparents were there, looking grim. Aunts, uncles, even some family friends. And Lily, curled up against Grandma, sobbing into her shoulder. The room went silent when I walked in, everyone staring at me, a mix of horror and disgust that made my blood run cold. "What the hell is happening?" I demanded, looking around, desperately searching for some explanation. Mom looked up, her face twisted with rage, a rage I'd never seen directed at me. "How could you? Your own sister? What are you talking about?" I was genuinely confused, looking from face to face. Dad stepped forward. His calm, financial advisor veneer was gone. He looked like he wanted to rip me apart with his bare hands. "Lily told us everything about how you've been coming into her room at night. For years." The accusation hit me like a goddamn freight train. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. "What? That's insane!" "I never touched her." Lily started sobbing harder. "You said no one would believe me. You said you'd hurt me if I told. You said it was our secret." "That's a lie," I yelled, the shock giving way to anger. "I've never said that. I've never done anything to her." "What the hell is going on?" Uncle Mike lunged again, but Dad and Steve held him back. "My buddy's a cop. You're going to prison, you piece of shit. They're going to love you in there." I tried to defend myself, tried to make them see how ridiculous this was. But it was like talking to a brick wall. No one was listening. Lily kept remembering more details, making up shit that never happened. Said I first touched her when she was 10, when I was home from high school for Christmas break. Said it had happened dozens of times since then. Said I threatened to hurt her, to hurt Mom and Dad, if she ever told anyone. Every word was a complete fabrication. But they were all nodding, consoling her, glaring at me. It was surreal. Like I'd stepped into some alternate universe where everything was backward. Then Dad snapped. He'd always been controlled, never violent. But something broke in him. He walked right up and hit me. A right hook that would make a heavyweight boxer proud. Caught me square in the jaw. I went down. Tasted blood where my teeth had cut into my cheek. "Get your things and get out. You're no son of mine," he said, standing over me, flexing his hand. Mom had already packed some of my clothes in trash bags. They were by the door. Dad grabbed my wallet, took out all the cards with his name on them. Credit cards, health insurance, everything. "Dad, please." "This isn't true," I begged, blood dripping from my split lip. "You've known me my whole life. You know I would never do something like this." He grabbed my shirt, dragged me to the door, and literally threw me down the front steps. I landed hard on my shoulder, feeling something pop. Later turned out to be a minor separation. The bags of clothes followed. Then my baseball gear. "If you ever come near this family again, I'll kill you myself," he said, then slammed the door. I sat there, on the lawn, blood on my face, shoulder throbbing, neighbors peeking through windows at the commotion. My entire life had just imploded. Spent that night in my truck in the baseball field parking lot, trying to process what had happened. Couldn't sleep, kept replaying the scene over and over, trying to understand how Lily could do this, how my parents could believe her without even questioning it. By morning, my jaw was swollen and purple. My shoulder hurt so bad I could barely move my arm. Called a teammate, Ryan. He let me crash on his couch for a week. His roommates weren't thrilled, but they tolerated me. I called, texted, emailed everyone in my family. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had known me my entire life. No responses. Except one text from Dad, "Contact us again," and I'm filing a restraining order. "You're dead to us." Ryan tried to help. "Dude, you need to go to the police. File a report about your dad hitting you. Get ahead of this thing." But I couldn't. Something in me couldn't accept that this was really happening. Kept thinking my parents would come to their senses, realize how insane this all was. And honestly, I was scared. What if Lily didn't back down? What if they believed her over me? How could I prove a negative? That I didn't do something? 2 weeks later, I got an email from the university. My tuition payment for the semester was overdue. My parents had canceled it mid-term. Went to the financial aid office, tried to get emergency loans. But without a co-signer, and with barely any credit history, I was screwed. Had to drop most of my classes to part-time status so I could work full-time to afford even that. Coach was understanding at first. Let me stay on the team. But I missed so many practices because of my new job, working security at a bar, that I barely played. My grades tanked. Went from dean's list to barely passing. Friends started avoiding me. Rumors were spreading. Someone in the family had told someone who told someone else. You know how it goes. Nobody called me a predator to my face. But I saw how people looked at me. How conversations stopped when I entered rooms. How girls would move away if I sat near them in class. 4 months later, my truck broke down. Cracked engine block. Thousands to repair. Couldn't afford it. Lost my delivery job that I'd picked up on top of the bar security gig. Got evicted from the shitty apartment I'd been renting with 2 other guys because I couldn't make rent. Started sleeping in the baseball team's equipment shed. Coach gave me the code. Taking showers in the locker room. Eating 1 meal a day at the cafeteria with the last of my meal plan. Coach found me there one night in February. Below freezing outside. I was bundled in 3 hoodies and a sleeping bag, using my duffel bag as a pillow. Instead of being pissed, he sat down next to me on the floor. "Son, what the hell happened to you?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. I told him everything. The accusation, my parents' reaction, being cut off, losing my truck, the apartment. He was the first person who actually listened to the whole story. When I finished, he didn't say I was lying. Didn't say he believed me either. Just nodded and sat there in silence for a minute. "You can stay here until the end of the semester. After that, I'll help you figure something out." He brought me a space heater the next day and a proper air mattress. Started inviting me to dinner at his house once a week. His wife always packed leftovers for me to take home. It wasn't much, but it was something. Someone giving a damn. I managed to finish the year with a 2.1 GPA, barely avoiding academic probation. But I was done with baseball. The fire was gone. Coach hooked me up with a summer job at a wilderness program for troubled teens in Colorado. Ironic, right? But it paid cash, provided housing in a staff cabin, and kept me fed. That fall, I didn't go back to school. Stayed at the wilderness program. Became a full-time guide. Spent days hiking mountains, teaching survival skills to rich kids whose parents didn't know what else to do with them. Built myself back up physically. The work was demanding, carrying 50-pound packs up mountains, chopping wood, building shelters. Put on 15 pounds of pure muscle in 6 months. At night, I'd get blackout drunk with the other guides. On days off, I experimented with anything I could get my hands on. Weed, acid, shrooms, coke. Wasn't careful. Didn't care. Was trying to numb myself to the reality that my old life was gone forever. After a kid died in a climbing accident that I probably could have prevented if I hadn't been nursing a hangover, the program director pulled me aside. "Jake, you're one of our best guides when you're on. The kids respect you. You know your shit in the field. But you're a liability when you're like this. I can't have you responsible for kids' lives when you're self-destructing. Got fired the next day. Spent the next year living out of my new beater car, a 1998 Honda Civic I bought for $1,200 cash. Worked whatever jobs I could find. Bouncer at bars, security at events, day labor, construction. Any job where I could use my size and nobody asked too many questions about my background. I avoided women completely. Avoided families. Would literally walk out of restaurants if a kid sat too close to my table. The fear of being accused again was paralyzing. Had nightmares where I was in prison. Other inmates finding out what I was in for. Would wake up in a cold sweat. Heart pounding so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. One night, I was working security at a college bar in Fort Collins. Recognized a guy from my old university. He'd been on the football team while I was there. He recognized me too. Started telling his friends who I was, what I'd supposedly done. By closing time, they were all giving me looks, making comments just loud enough for me to hear. Predator. Sick fuck. Someone should teach him a lesson. I tried to ignore it. Did my job. Escorted the last patrons out at 2 a.m. Was walking to my car when I got jumped in the parking lot. 3 guys from earlier. They'd been waiting. Called me a pedophile, a predator. Said they were going to make sure I couldn't hurt anyone else. I fought back. Landed some solid punches. Broke one guy's nose for sure. But it was 3 against 1, and they had the element of surprise. Ended up with 3 broken ribs, a fractured eye socket, dislocated shoulder, and a concussion. The guy with the broken nose must have freaked out because they ran off when a car pulled into the lot. The driver called an ambulance. Spent 2 nights in the hospital, then released with no place to go, no health insurance, and a $17,000 a medical bill I had no way of paying. The painkillers they gave me barely touched the pain. Couldn't work with my injuries. Slept in my car in Walmart parking lots. Taking sponge baths in gas station bathrooms when I could manage to lift my arms. I decided I was done. Just done. It was raining. Middle of the night. I drove to this old bridge outside town. High enough that jumping would definitely do the job. Parked my Civic. Walked to the middle. Climbed over the railing. My ribs screamed in pain with every movement. Stood there for I don't know how long. Rain soaking me. Staring down at the dark water. My phone was in my hand. No messages. No calls. 3 years of absolute silence from my family. No one was coming to save me. No one cared if I lived or died. Bit cold for a swim, don't you think? The voice startled me so bad I almost slipped. I grabbed the railing with my good arm, pain shooting through my broken ribs. Turned to see an old man standing there in a rain jacket with a fishing pole in his hand. Had to be in his 70s. Go away, I said, my voice hoarse. Can't do that, son, he replied calmly, like we were just having a normal conversation on a sunny day. See, if I go away and you jump, that makes me responsible in a way. It's not your problem until I saw you. Now it's my problem. That's how life works. He moved closer, not threatening, just steady. My name's Frank. Retired Marine Corps. Seen plenty of men at their breaking point. You want to tell me what's got you standing on the wrong side of this railing? You wouldn't understand. Try me, I don't know why, but I told him everything. The accusation being thrown out the last 3 years. Maybe because I figured I'd be dead soon anyway. Maybe because he was a stranger who didn't immediately look at me like I was a monster. Maybe because something in his eyes reminded me of my grandfather, the only person in my family who might have believed me if he wasn't suffering from dementia. When I finished, he just nodded, exactly like my old coach had. Then he said something I'll never forget. Son, you've been carrying this alone long enough. Put down the weight for one night. Come have a hot meal, dry clothes, and we'll talk about it with clear heads tomorrow. Why would you help someone like me? You don't know if I'm telling the truth. Frank's eyes were sharp, even in the dim light. Been reading men's faces for 50 years, in combat and in peace. You're either telling the truth or you're the best damn liar I've ever met. Either way, debt is permanent. Food isn't. I could have ignored him. Could have jumped anyway. Some days I wonder why I didn't. But something about his certainty, his calm in the face of my storm, made me climb back over that railing. Frank's house was small but immaculate. Military precision in everything. Books aligned perfectly on shelves. Shoes exactly parallel by the door. He gave me dry clothes that had belonged to his son, who had died in Afghanistan 10 years earlier. Made me take a hot shower while he cooked. That night, I slept on Frank's couch. Actually slept. For the first time in what felt like years. Next morning, he made me breakfast. Eggs, bacon, coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Then he offered me a job. Said he owned a small security firm that did executive protection, event security, and some specialized work for wealthy clients. Needed a young, strong guy who could take orders and keep his mouth shut. Why would you trust me with something like that? I asked. You just met me. I was about to kill myself. Frank looked me dead in the eye. Because a man pushed to the edge who chooses to step back has something worth living for, even if he doesn't know it yet. And because if you screw me over, I know exactly how to find you. For the next 6 months, I lived in Frank's guest room, worked for his company. He was a hard ass. 5 AM workouts, strict rules, no drinking on work nights. Made me go to the doctor for my injuries. Paid the bills himself, saying I could pay him back when I was on my feet. But he was fair. Paid me well, taught me about finance, investing, how to dress and talk to clients, how to be professional again. He also made me see a therapist. An old Vietnam vet buddy of his who specialized in PTSD. I resisted at first, but Frank wasn't taking no for an answer. You got your bell rung, son. Not just physically. Need to get your head straight if you're going to work for me. The therapy helped. Slowly. Taught me that what happened wasn't my fault. That I didn't deserve it. That I wasn't broken beyond repair. I saved enough for my own place after 6 months. A small apartment, nothing fancy, but mine. Clean, safe. Started taking classes at the community college. Business management, plus some specialized security certifications. Frank became like the father I'd lost. He never pushed me to contact my family. Never suggested I try to clear my name. He just said, some battles aren't worth fighting. Focus on the war. Building a life they can't take away from you. A year into working for Frank, he sent me to handle security for his niece's art gallery opening. Said it was a favor to his sister, but I know now he was playing matchmaker. Sophie was nothing like I expected. Frank had described her as smart as a whip and doesn't take shit from anyone, which was accurate, but incomplete. She was beautiful in this unconventional way. Tall, athletic, with these intense green eyes that seemed to look right through you. Dark hair cut in this asymmetrical style that somehow perfectly framed her face. Not conventionally pretty in a magazine cover way, but striking. The kind of woman who commands attention just by existing. We didn't hit it off at first. She thought I was just some muscle-bound security guy with no brain. I thought she was a stuck-up art snob. During the event, I overheard her explaining some abstract painting to a potential buyer, rolling her eyes when they walked away without purchasing. Not everyone gets it, I said, not really meaning to start a conversation. She looked me up and down, taking in my security uniform. And you do? Nope, but I'm not pretending to either. She almost smiled. Almost. Honesty. Refreshing. Throughout the night, I caught her watching me, not in a make sure the security guy isn't stealing anything way, but with curiosity. I was doing my job, scanning the room, watching the doors, keeping an eye on the more expensive pieces. Professional, alert, but unobtrusive. At the end of the night, as I was doing final checks and the last guests were leaving, she approached me. So, Uncle Frank says you're more than just the muscle. Your uncle talks too much, I replied. She laughed. It was a good laugh. Genuine, not the fake social laugh I'd heard all night. Actually, he barely talks at all, which is why when he does, people listen. He says, "You're going to school." Business management? Yeah. Plus some specialized security certifications. Interesting combination. Tell me about it. We talked until 2 a.m. About everything, except my past. She was smart, funny, challenging in all the right ways, had traveled extensively, had strong opinions about art and politics and music, but listened to my perspectives too. When I finally said I needed to go because I had an early training session with a new client, she handed me her card. "I have a security issue at my condo. Locks need upgrading. Maybe you could give me a consultation?" It was a transparent excuse. But I took it. That consultation turned into dinner, which turned into movie nights, which turned into weekends together. Sophie was like no one I'd ever dated. Fiercely independent, passionate about her work, but vulnerable in quiet moments. She'd been hurt too. Not the same way as me, but pain recognizes pain. For months, I avoided talking about my family. Made up vague stories when she asked. Said my parents had passed away in a car accident. That I was an only child. Sophie knew I was hiding something but didn't push. Frank, though, told me I needed to come clean. "That girl is falling for you," he said one day at work as we were planning security for an upcoming event, "and you're falling for her. She deserves the truth before it goes any further." He was right. So one night, over dinner at my apartment, I told her everything. The whole ugly story. Expected her to leave, to look at me differently, to have that seed of doubt that maybe, just maybe, Lily hadn't been lying. Instead, she took my hand across the table and said, "Thank you for trusting me. I believe you." 3 simple words I hadn't heard from anyone except Frank. I broke down right there at the dinner table, sobbing like a child. She just held me, letting me get it all out. 2 years after we met, I proposed. Did it right. Down on one knee, in the spot where we'd had our first real date, ring in hand, heart pounding like crazy. Frank walked her down the aisle since her own father had died years before. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, started building a real life. I finished my degree, became a partner in Frank's firm. We expanded from local security to regional, then national contracts. Developed a reputation for professionalism and discretion. Sophie's art career took off. Her work started appearing in major galleries, commanding impressive prices. We were talking about starting a family. I was finally happy, finally at peace. The nightmares were less frequent. I could be around children without panicking. Had even reconnected with a few old friends from college who'd reached out after hearing snippets of the real story through mutual acquaintances. My old life felt distant, like it had happened to someone else. I still thought about my family sometimes. Wondered if they ever doubted Lily's story, if they ever regretted what they'd done. But I had accepted that chapter was closed. I had a new family now. People who chose me, who stood by me. That was enough. Or so I thought. It was a random Tuesday in March. I was in my office, reviewing security protocols for an upcoming client event. A billionaire tech CEO visiting for a conference who needed discreet protection. My assistant buzzed me on the intercom. "Sir, you have a call on line 1. Woman wouldn't give her name but says it's a family emergency." My first thought was Sophie or Frank. "Put her through." I picked up the receiver. "Hello. This is Jake, not my real name, obviously." Silence. Then a sob. "Jake, it's Mom." My body went cold. I hadn't heard her voice in 7 years. I wanted to hang up. Wanted to scream. Instead, I just said, "What do you want?" "Please don't hang up," she begged. "We need to talk to you. It's important. We haven't talked in 7 years. Nothing could be that important." My voice was ice. Lily confessed. She lied about everything. She made it all up. The world stopped. 7 years of pain, of rebuilding my life from nothing, of nightmares and panic attacks and therapy. All because of a lie. A lie I'd always known it was, but hearing her admit it? "Jake, are you there?" I hung up, walked out of my office, told my assistant to cancel my meetings, and drove to Frank's house. After I told him, he just nodded and said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You just don't know if it's the right thing." He was right. Part of me wanted to ignore them, keep them cut out of my life forever. Another part needed answers, needed to hear the truth admitted to my face. Sophie felt the same when I told her that night. "You need closure," she said, "but whatever you decide, I'm with you." "And Jake?" "This doesn't change anything between us. I'm still here, no matter what." For 2 weeks, I ignored the calls and texts that started flooding in. From Mom, from Dad, even from relatives who had shut me out years ago. Talked it through with my therapist. Yes, I have one. Not ashamed to admit it. Finally decided I needed to face them. But on my terms. I texted my mother, public place. Coffee shop on Main Street. Sunday, 2 p.m. Just you, Dad, and Lily. I'll have people with me. One chance only. Sunday came. Frank insisted on coming as backup. Sophie was by my side, gripping my hand so tight it almost hurt. We got there early, took a table in the corner where I could see all entrances and exits. Old security habit that never goes away. My stomach was in knots. Part of me still expected them not to show, or for this to be some elaborate trap. Sophie kept checking on me, her eyes full of concern. "We can leave any time, okay? Just say the word." They arrived exactly at 2 p.m. Mom looked older than I remembered. Hair more gray than brown now, face lined with stress. Dad had lost weight, slumped almost. His expensive suits replaced by khakis, and a button-down that had seen better days. Lily, now 22, looked completely different from the teenager I remembered. Her face was thinner, her eyes downcast. None of the dramatic flair she'd always had. Mom saw me first, her eyes filled with tears, and she rushed forward, arms outstretched for a hug. I stepped back, putting Sophie slightly between us. "Sit." No one spoke for what felt like minutes. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Son, I'm not your son," I cut him off. "You made that very clear 7 years ago. Now talk." "Why am I here?" Mom started crying. Dad looked broken. Lily still stared at the floor. 3 months ago, Dad began, his voice rough. Lily called a family meeting. She told us that she had lied about everything. I looked at Lily. "Look at me." Slowly, she raised her eyes. They were red from crying. "Why?" My voice didn't even sound like my own. She took a shaky breath. "I was jealous. You were the perfect son. Star athlete. Smart. Everyone loved you. Mom and Dad gave you everything. I wanted them to love me more, to pay attention to me. So you accused me of something that could have sent me to prison? Destroyed my entire life?" The anger I thought I'd processed years ago came rushing back. "I didn't think it would go that far," she whispered. "I thought they'd just get mad at you. Maybe ground you. But then everyone started asking questions and I couldn't take it back. And then it just kept going. Everyone was being so nice to me, giving me things, making me feel special. I didn't know how to stop it. And you too?" I looked at my parents. "You threw me out without even listening to me, without any proof." Dad tried to explain. "We thought we were protecting her. She was our little girl, and you were." I slammed my hand on the table. The whole coffee shop went quiet. People at nearby tables pretended not to listen, but they were all ears. I wasn't even home for the 4th of July weekend she claimed it happened. I was at a baseball tournament in Denver. There were pictures all over social media. "Did you even check?" Mom put her hand over her mouth. Dad went pale. "Do you know what happened after you threw me out?" I demanded. "My truck broke down. I lost my apartment. I slept in the baseball equipment shed. I almost died from exposure. I got beaten up by people who heard rumors. I stood on a bridge ready to jump because the family who was supposed to love me believed the worst without a single question. I pulled out my phone, showed them pictures. Me with my black eye and split lip from the bar fight. Me looking emaciated during my homeless period. My hospital records from the beating. I was your son. My voice broke. Sophie squeezed my hand. Frank put his hand on my shoulder, grounding me. We're so sorry, Mom sobbed. We made a terrible mistake. We want to make it right. Make it right? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. How exactly do you plan to do that? Give me back 7 years of my life? Erase the nightmares? Undo the trauma of being homeless? Of being beaten? Of standing on that bridge ready to die? Mom was full on sobbing now. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. We want you to come home, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. We want our family back together. That's not happening. I have a family now. I looked at Sophie and Frank. People who actually stood by me. Lily finally spoke up. There's something else you should know. She told me how, after her confession, everything changed. My parents had cut her off financially, took away the car they'd bought her for her 16th birthday, a BMW, while I was sleeping in my truck, and sold it. She had to drop out of her expensive private university and work retail while taking night classes at community college. Dad's company had suffered after some bad investments, and they had to downsize from their big house to a condo. Mom's social standing in the community was ruined when word got out about Lily's lie. We need your help, Jake, Mom admitted, finally looking ashamed. Your father's business is struggling. We're going to lose the condo. Lily can't afford to continue school. We've had to sell almost everything. And there it was. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted money. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. Let me get this straight. You destroy my life, disown me, leave me homeless, and now that I've managed to build a successful life despite you, you want me to bail you out? We're family, Dad said weakly. No, we're not. I stood up. You made your choice 7 years ago. Now, you can live with it. Please, Lily begged, tears streaming down her face. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Mom and Dad shouldn't suffer for my mistake. You're right. They should suffer for their mistake. I looked at my parents. I forgive Lily. She was a child who made a terrible choice. But you two were adults who should have protected both your children. Instead, you threw one away without a second thought. I put money on the table for our coffee. As we were leaving, Mom grabbed my arm. Please don't leave it like this. What can we do? What do you want from us? I looked at her for a long moment. I want you to remember how it feels to have everything taken away, to feel helpless, to have no one believe in you. Maybe then you'll understand what you did to me. Sophie, Frank, and I walked out. As we reached the car, Frank squeezed my shoulder. Proud of you, son. That was 2 years ago. I've heard through mutual connections that my parents lost the condo. Dad works at a big box store now. Mom cleans houses. Lily dropped out of school completely and moved to another state. Sometimes, I think about reaching out. Sophie says that would be the final step in my healing. Forgiveness. Not for their sake, but for mine. Frank says it's my choice, and he'll back me either way. For now, I'm focusing on my own family. Sophie is pregnant with our first child. We're expanding the security firm into 3 new states. Building something real that can't be taken away.